Hello everyone, Ghostbusters has returned to cinemas, and who you gonna call? A couple of years ago when Afterlife came out, I went over my favorite Ghostbusters films. You can check out that previous video for a more in-depth conversation on those films. Today, I'm just going to bring a brief ranking going over the original canon films, not counting the 2016 reboot, but I will be counting the video game because in my eyes, with Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd writing that is like the third film they never made in the early 90s. So I'm going to be counting that in addition to the original first two films, and then Afterlife and Frozen Empire. Let me know your favorite Ghostbusters films down in the comments below. Ghostbusters turns 40 this year, and it's had quite a life in pop culture, whether it be through films, music, comic books, animation, and even video games. I love all these films, but some films I like more than others. Starting off at number 5 is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I love the real Ghostbusters elements of this film. There are many moments that feel true to not only the first two films, but the real Ghostbusters animated show. And growing up with that, it was kind of cool seeing the different gadgets in the world. I just wish they did more with the originals and with the kids. To say the least, this is a bit of a step down from Afterlife, I think. It moves really fast. It feels like there's like some portions missing. I don't know. It's an entertaining film, but I left feeling underwhelmed. It felt like it was missing something, you know? It felt like it wasn't like the love letter of the previous film. I didn't have the heart and soul of the originals. That being said, it was nice seeing the OG Ghostbusters back. Dan Aykroyd gives a phenomenal performance as Ray Stantz in this film. He very much reminded me of like Harrison Ford as Han Solo in Star Wars The Force Awakens. Bill Murray returns as Peter Venkman, and he slips into that role so well. Say one thing about Afterlife, they had quick cameos, but I felt like they mattered in the original when they saved the day at the end, even though they weren't in the film until the very ending. But that's one thing I have to say that is a strength over the previous film, is that they're in it more. Winston funds the whole Ghostbusters operation. You get Paul Rudd's character in this, and in many ways at the beginning of this, he feels more like he's an Ant-Man rather than Ghostbusters. It's nice seeing Phoebe's mom embrace the Ghostbuster legacy, and then Phoebe takes a back seat in this. Trevor kind of doesn't have much to do, neither does Lucky or Podcast. And they're in it, but you just don't feel that they're part of the team that they were in the previous film. Despite its flaws, though, I did love the story with the ghost girl and Phoebe. That was great, seeing her deal with loneliness and betrayal with this friend. And that ghost had a very dark backstory, and it was great seeing this new villain, Graka, menacing villain. One thing that hurt this film is that Sony showed too much in the trailer, so like the whole third act is pretty much shown in the trailer. Most of the Ghostbusters appearances are shown in the trailer. It kind of reminded me of Men in Black 2, to where like it wasn't entirely a bad movie. You just were left underwhelmed because you saw everything, and there was like no surprise mystiqueness to it like Afterlife. That being said, I love seeing Slimer back. Oh yeah, the mayor. He's still dickless after all these years. It was great seeing him return. Seeing familiar faces, a librarian, seeing different gadgets with the drone ghost catcher, the Ecto-C. Gil Kinnan took over from Jason Reitman. He did Monster House in the Poltergeist remake, and he does a good job here. But I just think, I don't know if it was the editing or the writing or something's missing from this film. To say the least, this one felt more commercial, and I felt like they wasted a lot of potential with not only the new characters, with the kids, but also the OG Ghostbusters. I feel like they still could have done more. And by a long shot, if there is a third film, I hope Jason Reitman returns. After that, at number 4 for me is Ghostbusters Afterlife. This film was a pleasant surprise after the 2016 reboot. It's because of Jason Reitman. His father, Ivan Reitman, may he rest in peace, he was so great as a director. He did the first two Ghostbusters. And you could feel the legacy here, not only with Egon Spengler's family, but with the filmmaker himself and the story he is telling. And I love that he did it with kids. This is something completely different. A legacy sequel in many ways that does take notes from like The Force Awakens, but it does something that The Force Awakens and Last Jedi never did. It respects the legacy while also continuing the story with characters that we root for just as much as the originals. McKenna Grace is great as Phoebe. She is the show stealer here. I love Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon's relationship here, as a teacher and then Phoebe's mother, that whole romance, and then what happens later with the whole Keymaster Gatekeeper. It was interesting seeing Gozer return, but I like how they did it, and I like how the Ghostbusters were teased throughout the movie before they showed up, and I kind of wish they were in it more, but like I said about Frozen Empire, they were not in this one as much, but they felt like they mattered when they showed up. And that last part, the whole story itself really has a lot to say about loss and grief. And Egon Spengler, how they handled that was just nothing short of amazing. How they made it look like Harold Ramis and the movie magic they created. I felt sad. This is the first time a Ghostbusters movie almost made me cry. I'm just like in tears at the end of that film. It's like Ghost with Patrick Swayze or something, This whole film felt like it was made with a labor of love, while also doing its own thing to make it stand on its own from the first two films. It wasn't a bad trilogy closer in many ways, and it also left the door open for the future. And with the world building of Frozen Empire and what they set up with the family here, I'm hoping they maybe get one more shot to basically live up to their full potential with the new cast. But yeah, I think in the future of Ghostbusters, just give it to Phoebe, Lucky, Trevor, and Podcast. There's the future of Ghostbusters right there. Even if you have to wait till they're older and out of college, do it. And then seeing the practical effects. That's one thing I think this has over Frozen Empire with all the CG stuff, is seeing the practical effects used with the Keymaster Gatekeeper. That Walmart scene is just funny. Oh, and Afterlife, I also love the cameo with Sigourney Weaver as Dana. That was such a good callback to the original film. This is a feel-good kind of 80s feeling movie, like Goonies or something. After that, at number 3, for me, is Ghostbusters 2. I grew up with both films on VHS, and I actually love Ghostbusters 1 and 2 equally. I never really got the hate. I can see that it's not as good as number 1, but it's a completely different monster. And who could forget Vigo the Carpathian? Vigo! Yawnish. In Ghostbusters 2, seeing Dana and then Oscar the baby, I'm still waiting to see him growing up in the new films. But I like that, how the Ghostbusters come back after 5 years. They're not popular. They're doing birthday parties, trying to get by. And then what happens? Ghosts show up. And that courthouse scene is where the movie really starts getting going. I love that. Rick Moranis is Louis Tully in this. Annie Potts. I love how they made her hairdo look more like the cartoon here with the real Ghostbusters. But the soundtrack, who could forget On Our Own by Bobby Brown? And I guess we're gonna have to take control. It just gets stuck in your head, Love the soundtrack here, the montage, how they update the Ecto-1, Ghostbusters 2 literally right in front of the screen. And it does follow a similar formula to the original film, but that's part of the charm here. And even though they did have studio interference, they made the best of what they could with this. I love the slime, the Statue of Liberty scene, and the showdown on New Year's Eve. That one psychic was right, actually. If it wasn't for the Ghostbusters, the world would have ended on New Year's Eve 1989. But I love this movie. It has that 80s charm still. It has that supernatural spookiness. That's one thing about the first two films. They're much more supernatural and scary than some of the later ones. This film has all the Ghostbusters still. Not a bad ending for a while for the Ghostbusters films. I love this. I got the 10-year anniversary VHS as well as a 15th anniversary VHS in 99. After that, at number 2, for me, it's not a movie, but I count it as a third film. Ghostbusters the video game is amazing. Seriously, it's like the Ghostbusters Hellscape script that was never made into a film. It's like that. Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd wrote this, and I love this video game. It is a true successor. It's like, hey, we didn't get to make a third movie. Here's the third movie we never made. And that's what it is. The cast all comes back, and they look young. They're like the way they were in 1991. I love seeing the return of other characters and ghosts, and as well as origins explored. And it's genius that they introduce a new recruit for the perspective of the player. But outside the gameplay, the awesome gameplay, you have a great story here. An explanation for the devices, for the ghosts, the different type of spirits, the different levels of classes, as well as an iconic story of basically this like hell on earth happening in New York City with like a graveyard showing up in Central Park, explaining the origins of Gozer and Vigo the Carpathian, and having them fight Ivo Shandor, which is incredible with his spirit possessing the mayor. I love it. And that can kind of be canon to Afterlife too, considering what happens to Ivo, with a splitting headache. But Oh man, Ghostbusters the video game, if you've never played it, it's on Xbox and PlayStation stores. Play the remastered version, you're gonna love it. The return of Stay Puft. It wasn't me this time, I swear. Ray, just telling the Ghostbusters that, I just love it. It's just a must play for any and every Ghostbusters fan out there. And after that at number 1, who are you gonna call? The original Ghostbusters. I love the first Ghostbusters film. It's a classic. It's lightning in a bottle. And I love all these films, but they kind of suffered the Jurassic Park syndrome of like the sequels, trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle. And that's something I don't think you could really do, you know? There's something special about this film with them being scientists at a university, losing their job, and then having to basically be like exterminators for ghosts, just everyday blue-collar workers. And there's something so grounded, funny, and just perfect about that, you know? Seeing the ghosts, and there's a reason for the ghosts with the arrival of Gozer, you know, Zool. Dana Barrett, Peter Venkman's relationship in this film. There's some funny scenes with her and also with her being possessed. There is no Dana, there's only Zool, you know? It's like my girlfriend just turned to a giant dog, you know? Rick Moranis, okay, who brought a dog? You know? There's some funny stuff here. Look at the size of that Twinkie, you know? Winston Zeddemore there, Ernie Hudson. It's like, as long as there's a steady paycheck, I believe anything you tell me. Annie Potts, and then Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, and Dan Aykroyd, just seeing the characters here. And who could forget the hotel? We came, we saw, we kicked its ass! Ray Park Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme. Oh man, this is such an original premise, and everything that's built from this universe was all due to how iconic and original this first film is. Saving the day. Saving the day. Then who could forget the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man? Such an iconic scene there that's funny. And the final battle. This movie is just awesome. Mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together. This film, it was still kind of a supernatural scary movie that just had comedy sprinkled in. And the whole Revelations element of that third act really ups the stakes. Just an American movie classic, and it's the film that started it all. Anyway, those are my least to most favorite Ghostbusters films, but out of all these films, I enjoy each and every one of them for their own reasons, including the video game. Let me know your favorite Ghostbusters films down in the comments below. And when there's a spook, specter, or ghost, who are you gonna call? The Ghostbusters.